Hello everybody and welcome back to Piano Practice Partner. I hope you're doing well and you've enjoyed the previous lessons and practice along where we were learning Autumn Leaves, the jazz standard Autumn Leaves, and then the melody on top. So just a very quick refresher on what we did there, because some of that information will be really useful for what we're looking at today. So with our initial lessons, we've been looking at the 2-5-1 sequence, and we have put that into this song, Autumn Leaves. And then we learn in the last lesson the melody, which was lots of fun, and we did some practice on that in the practice along. So hopefully that's getting more and more familiar to you. If you haven't done that, maybe go back and look at those lessons. Today we're going to be expanding on the 2-5-1, but in a different key, and we're going to figure out what that means together in real time, because we're learning together. This is some accountability for both of us to keep ourselves progressing. So we're going to look at the 2-5-1 today in F major. And today should be really helpful in just refreshing how we figure out what this is. So the 2-5-1. So to begin with, let's remind ourselves what F major is. So here's our F, and to play the F major scale, we are using these notes: F, G, A sharp, C, D, E, and F. So there's one black note here, this A sharp. That's how we're playing the scale here, using our finger crossing our thumb there. So why is it important for us to know the scale? Well, we need to know the numbers of the notes. So F, in the key of F major, is our new 1. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And this is really handy when we're looking at our 2-5-1s, because now we know where our 2 is. So 1, 2 is the G, 3, 4, 5 is the C, and then our 1 is where we started. So why don't we write that down? Our G is the 2, our C is the 5, and our 1 is the F. So now, very quickly, look, we've figured out the 2-5-1 in F major. It's G, C, F. Now if we refer that back to the other 2-5-1s we've been learning, we've learned it in C major. Sounds similar, doesn't it? The intervals are the same. So you can hear the sequence, you can hear the intervals between them. We're just now in a new key. So we have G, we have C, and we have F. Now, if you cast your minds back to the lesson where we learned about Roman numerals and the 2-5-1, we learned something very important about the way that this was written compared to these two Roman numerals. As we can see, this is lowercase 2, and this is uppercase 5 and 1. So the lowercase means that it's a minor chord, and the uppercase means that it's a major. So when we come to play the G, we'd be playing the G minor. So if we played this, whilst that's absolutely fine, it's very different from what we're aiming for, which is the minor 2-5-1. And we do that by making this number 2, the 2 chord, the minor. So it would now sound like this. So we're playing the G as a G minor. And do you remember how we make a minor chord? It's all to do with the thirds. So we flatten the third note of the chord. So let's come back to C major, because it's a really clear and obvious example for us, because it's the most simple of the keys. So all white notes. A major chord is made up of the 1, the 3, and the 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 1, 3, 5 makes a major chord. And it's the third note here to make a minor chord becomes a flattened note. So we move the third in the major chord down half a step. So now if we just play this chord, this is a C minor chord. So C major. If we wanted to turn it into a minor chord, we flatten the third, becomes a C minor chord. And that's true of any major to minor chord. So with G, Here's our G major chord, the 1, the 3, and the 5 of G. All we need to do is we need to take this third note here and move it half a step down. So it now becomes a G minor chord. Amazing, we've now figured out the G minor chord, so now we've got all the information we need to play the 2-5-1 in a brand new key of F major. We're playing the G minor, the C major, and the F major. Minor 2, the 5, the 1. Now let's compare that to the 2-5-1 in C major. You can hear the intervals, right? So this is really important, right? Because what we're wanting to do, we could just learn C, G, F, right? We could just go by rote, it's this. Great. But by understanding the 2-5-1 and how we make that means we can pick this up and put it down in any key. So the same way that we initially learnt it in C major, we've now understood the concept and just transposed it to a different key, the same way that we did for A minor. So we could take this and challenge ourselves. So let's prove that to ourselves now by just picking any note, any scale, and applying this to that scale. So let's go for D. D major, okay? So first of all, we'll need to find out the scale. So we haven't looked at this yet, but that's the D major scale. So now we need to identify the 2, the 5, and the 1. Well, we know that the 2 is right next door to the 1. So it's E. I'm going to write this down just for ease. So E, then the 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's our A. And then our 1 is just where we started, the D. So the 2-5-1 of D major is... And there we go. We can hear that interval, can't we? Sounds very similar to, and sounds very similar to, because it's the same interval, just in a different key. So what would we do next? We'd have to remind ourselves that the 2 here is the minor 2. So here's E major, and remember how we made a major chord into a minor chord? The 1, the 3, and the 5. We flatten the third, so we take this note down half a step. So there's E minor. Next we need to figure out where our A major is, which is here. Perfect. And then our D major chord. So altogether we've got... Amazing. So very quickly, together, in real time, we've figured out the 2-5-1 of D major. Just to prove to ourselves that we can pick up concept and apply it to another key. This is the validity of learning it rather than just by rote positions. But enough, that's just proof of concept. We're going to rub that out because this is what we're focusing on. Coming back to our 2-5-1 in F major, G minor, C major, F major. If you've been following along the lessons, you probably know what I'm about to say. We're jumping around quite a lot. This is all root positions. And we've got this big jump from G minor up to C major, and then back down to F major. So what could we do to make life a little bit easier for ourselves? We can start applying inversions. And if you remember, inversions just take the notes that we're playing and reorders them. So here, for example, we're playing G, A sharp, and D. We could reorder this by taking the D that's up here and putting it below. So that's still the same chord, just a new inversion. Or we could take the G that's down here and put it on top. That would become... So now we have several different ways of playing it. Beautiful. And we can do that for each of the chords. So for C, could become, or could be. Amazing. And for F, if we take the bottom note and place it on top. And now we can do the same, place the bottom note and put it on top. So there are 3 inversions for each of the chords. So now we can look at where we play our notes and where groupings of notes are close together rather than far apart. So if we play our G minor here, how could we play C? We are already playing a G with our thumb here. So all we need to do is add the C and the E. So instead of jumping up, we could keep our thumb where it is and play the E here and the C to make our C chord. So that just becomes, and then down to the F in the root position. It's nice and easy. So that's one option. We could also choose to maybe play the G here, and then the C becomes here, and the F is an inversion there, because instead of playing the C up the top here, I've played the C down the bottom. From the C to the F, I've just moved the 2 fingers up. So altogether, that looked like. So inversions make our life a hell of a lot easier because we're pulling things closer together, so there's not a lot of jumping around. It also gives us variety because we've now learnt it several different ways. So we can add some texture and colour and variety to exactly the same chords. They just sound different to our ears because of the placement of the notes within the octave range. So it's a really quick and easy way of taking 3 chords and then suddenly exploding it into a whole other world. So what could we do next? These sound fine, but when we've been playing Autumn Leaves, for example, in the previous lessons, how rich does that sound? And why does it sound a bit richer? Well, I'm playing more notes here. So if we take our 2-5-1 of C major, just coming back to C major, because we've done a lot of practice on this so far, we could play the 2-5-1 like this, couldn't we? All root positions. But we're only playing 3 notes each time. Yes, we're playing 4 notes, but we're just doubling within the bass, right? Because we're going root note in the bass, root note in the bass. So we're adding some texture and some depth by playing it in a different octave, but it's still essentially only 3 notes. So what we looked at was adding 7ths and 9ths. If that feels like, oh, 7ths, 9ths, please, I'm getting overwhelmed. What do you mean? Well, we know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for this scale, in whatever scale we're in. So all we're doing to add a 7th or a 9th is adding the 7th note. So for C major, a 7th would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we'd be adding this B here. So if we played the C major chord now, and I wanted to add a 7th, I'd add the 7th note of the scale. There we go. And if I wanted to add a 9th, well, we only went up to 8, didn't we? So the 9th would just be 1 up from the 8 up here. So that is essentially the 2. So whenever you hear 9th, add a 9th. So you could think to yourself, count all the way up to 8 and then go 1 above. Or you could just think the 9th is essentially the 2. So you can play it up here if you want, or you can play it down here. So if I was to add a 9th, it's a big stretch there. So what happens if I play it here? Or what you could do is you could think, what happens if my left hand takes the 1, which leaves my right hand free to play the 2, i.e. the 9, the 3, the 5, and the 7. And if you didn't want to play the 2 down here, i.e. the 9, you could now place it up here because your left hand's playing the 1. So you play 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So suddenly we've taken the C major chord, which sounds absolutely fine, but we've learned how to very quickly go add a 7, or add a 7th and a 9th. And suddenly it sounds so much fuller, so much richer. So we want to take this now and apply it to our 2-5-1 in F major. So here's our G minor chord. Where's our 7? Well, we can think our G's up here, so it's 1 down. Or we can just look next door to our root note here, which is the F. So there's our 7 for our G minor. Now we have just done C in the previous example and put the 7th here. Now there's a little thing to bear in mind because we're in the key of F major. If we were to play C with the 7th here, as we were just doing in the example of C major, and just pick that up and put that in the sequence of 2, 5, 1 in F major, listen to what happens. Did something stand out as sounding slightly funky from this? Sounds a bit clashy, doesn't it? And it's this 7th note here. Now, why does this sound wrong in the context of this? Ugh. You can really hear it, right? It clashes. What's gone wrong there? Let's come back to this, the F major scale. What did you notice? We play our black note, A sharp here, and then we skip up to C. So in the key of F major, there is no B. And in that C major with the 7th, we're playing the B. Okay, if that is confusing, let me try and break it down a bit further, because it's good for my brain, it's good for your brain, it's good for everyone's brain. In C major, there are no black notes, it's all white notes. So adding the 7th means we're all okay, because it's all white notes. We're all good. But in F major, there's this one black note and the omission of this B. So if we try and play that B in the C major chord of F major, it sounds odd because it doesn't exist in this key. So what would we do instead? Well, we know that we don't have the B in F major. We have this A sharp or B flat, depending on how you look at it. So instead of playing this note for the 7th in C, we'd play the black note here, this A sharp. So that would now sound like this. And let's see if it sounds a little bit better. Ah, there you go. That sounds palatable, doesn't it? Now I'll play the wrong one so we can hear the difference. You can really hear it, can't you, in context? It really clangs out. I'll play it one more time wrong. Ugh. And now I'll play it when we're playing that A sharp. So there we go. There's our 7ths for F major 2, 5, 1. So now let's look at adding 9ths. Now in the previous example of the C major 2, 5, 1, we figured out that actually when we come to add a 9th, how do we get our fingers to do it? There's a lot of stretching, it's kind of hard. So we could rearrange our hand for inversions, or quite an easy way of looking at it is to do the one note with the left hand and then shift the right hand up. So that instead of being this becomes the 1 in the left hand, then everything goes up in the right hand. So let's take that concept and apply it to the G minor. So there's our G minor with the 7th. So what would we do? We'd take the G in our left hand, which means we could then shift up. And then we just need to find the 9, which is there. So now we've got a much richer sounding G minor chord. So we've got the 1, the 3, the 5, the 7, and the 9. Beautiful. Now let's apply that to the C. Remember, it's this black note as the 7. So what we do here, I'm just going to jump down the octave so I don't end up going off camera. So we've got now the 1 in the left hand, so we'd shift everything up. So we'd now go, there's our 9, because remember C, 1 up, 9. So there's our C chord with our 7th and our 9th, and then the F was here. So what we do, play the 1 here and we shift our right hand up. Beautiful. So very quickly we figured out the 7ths and 9ths for these chords. And then wonderful. Hopefully this is all making sense. I'm finding this really exciting as a process because suddenly I'm understanding and demystifying what feels quite scary. And when I've seen other explanations online or people telling me stuff, I'm like, how are you doing that? This suddenly starts to feel manageable, I think, because you're just understanding the notes, understanding the sequencing, and then just moving things up and down. Suddenly it's not about the scariness of all these other notes. There's just 12, and it's just depending on how we order them. If this is still feeling a little bit, whoa, I'm not fully with you, please go onto the channel, Piano Practice Partner, because a few lessons ago, we looked at the 251 for the very first time. So hopefully that video lesson and then the subsequent practice along sessions really break this down in a very basic, it's the first time we've ever looked at this approach. Check that out if you are still a little bit hazy on what the hell is going on here. But if you're still with me, let's crack on. So what am I going to say next? Inversions. That's right, because there's a lot of jumping around. So how will we start to group these things a little bit more conveniently for ourselves? If you have looked at those previous 251 lessons and stuck with me and done the autumn leaves exercises, there's something that we noticed within the sequencing and the patterning of playing these 251s. So if we take this G minor and we play it in this new position, so we've got the 7th and the 9th. In the previous lessons, we figured out that if we move these top 2 fingers down, we suddenly arrive at our next chord, the C, with all the notes that we need. Right? It's sort of like magic. So let's break that down just for real clarity. So in this G minor, with the 7th and the 9th, we're playing, let's write it down, just so we can really prove it to ourselves. We're playing A sharp, D, F. So we're playing these notes. A sharp, D, F, and A, just for real clarity. Now let's look at our C with the 7th and the 9th. So we're playing the E, the G, A sharp, and the D, right? Within our right hand. So when we're looking at groupings and inversions, what we can do is we can think and even write it down like this. What are the shared notes here? Well, let's play this G chord with the 7th and the 9th. A sharp, D, F, A. If we look over here, we've got the A sharp still included, so we can keep that as it is. We've got the D still included, so we just keep that as it is. So it's just the top 2 notes. And we figured out that if we just move them down, so the F here moves down half a step to become this E. So it's just there to there. And for the top note here, this A just moves one whole step down to this G. So suddenly, instead of a big move, we're just moving these top 2 fingers. So that's now going from our G minor with the 7th and the 9th, moving the top 2 fingers down. We've suddenly got our C major with the 7th and the 9th without having to do anything. Easy. Look, we're not having to jump around. And we're getting this lovely rich chord. Now, quickly, if we take our next chord, which was the F, okay? We added that 7th and 9th, but we had the root here, so we went. So what have we got there? We've got A, C, E, and G. So let's just write that down. So wherever we ended up, we've gone from here. So what have we got? We've got A sharp, we've got D, we've got E, and we've got G. So what do you notice immediately? We're already playing the E and the G up here on the top 2. And the A and the C that we need to get to, we're just one step away. So the A sharp can come down to the A, and this D can come down to the C. Top 2 fingers stay the same. So we're now going from here to get our next chord. We found out during our previous lessons that that concept applies to the 251 with the inversions of the 7ths and 9ths. To any of the 251s with the 7ths and 9ths, we played our first chord, the minor 2, and then to get to the next chord, the 5, we just moved our top 2 fingers down. Then to get from the 5 to the 1, we moved our bottom 2 fingers down. So, very simply, top 2 fingers move down, bottom 2 fingers move down. And look, let's do that for the 251 and C major. Top 2 fingers move down, bottom 2 fingers move down. It tracks. Let's try that with the other 251 we learned, which was in A minor. Top 2 fingers move down, bottom 2 fingers move down. Wow. So suddenly, again, rather than thinking, oh, I now need to learn the 7ths and the 9ths and add more stuff into my brain, really simply, I'm moving stuff down. So suddenly we've got this new 251 that we've learned its basic version. We've learned how to very quickly add the 7ths and understood why the 7th is the black note here. We've learned how to make that into 7ths and 9ths, and then we've applied inversions to these 7ths and 9ths to add some richness, but also figured out how we step our fingers down to make it nice and easy. How cool is that? I mean, I hope you're excited as I am, because suddenly that feels like a really easy concept to understand and get my fingers around. Great, so why don't we just test that as well and see if that top 2 fingers, bottom 2 fingers works if we're playing it in a different position. So we've got it with the 7ths and the 9ths up here. What happens if we were to play it in the root, but with the 7th? So we're not adding a 9th here, we're just playing a little bit more simply. Let's move our top 2 fingers down. That works. And then let's move our bottom 2 fingers down. Holy smokes, it works. So suddenly, rather than having to jump around here, we can play it in the simple inversion, but really easy. Just a little sequence of stepping down. Top 2 fingers move down, bottom 2 fingers move down. Whoa. So we have learned the F major 251, and now we can cycle it in 2 different versions with 7ths and 7ths and 9ths. So let's listen to all that together. We've got the basic root position, jumping around. We could also do that with some inversions that we've learned. So we can come up here for the C and down to the F. We can now add the 7ths on top of those and know that we can move the top 2 fingers down to come to the 5 chord and then the bottom 2 for the 1 chord. And we can also do that with the 7ths and 9ths and apply the same concept of moving the top 2 fingers down to get to the 5 chord and then the bottom 2 fingers down to get to the 1 chord. Pretty cool. So that's the lesson for today, guys. That's really cool that we've understood the F major 251 very quickly and applied everything we've been learning thus far, adding the 7ths, adding the 9ths, adding inversions. You can play around with that as much as you want. Get really used to playing the root positions, playing the 7ths, playing the 9ths, adding the inversions so that you can choose to move between any which one of these to add some colour and some variety to the playing. Next week will be the practice along session for this, so we'll spend some dedicated time, now that we've digested what this is, we'll spend some dedicated time setting a timer, a little trusty timer here. Whoop. I'll set up the task, we'll hit go, and then together we'll practice along just to get that really under our fingers. And then the following week, when we're back in the lesson, we're going to be taking this and applying it to a very brand new song. A very brand new song? That's bad grammar, but you get what I mean. We're going to learn a new song. We're rattling through it. This is super exciting. Thank you so much. If you haven't subscribed already, please hit that button. It really helps me know that this is working and that you're enjoying what you're learning. Drop me a comment. Let me know your wins of the week, where you're learning from. And I hope to see you very soon here on Piano Practice Partner.